Well, welcome back to the One Big Thing podcast. I am your host, Steve Campbell. Folks, thanks for joining me on another exciting journey today. This one's kind of cool. As I've told you guys, as I've sourced different guests for this show, some of them have been personal friends, some have been people that I've known. Some of my last speakers you've heard about have been authors that I've read their books, and I've just reached out to them and said, hey, I've got this vision for the show. You want to run with me? And it's been pleasantly surprising how many people are like, yeah, I'd love to come on your show. Today, we're going to turn not from the pages of a book, but from the notes of a song to Stephen Day. Stephen Day is somebody that just through probably what I listen to on Spotify, the music genres, the Jack Johnsons, the John Mayer, Spotify said, hey, you should check out Stephen Day, probably a year and a half, 2 years ago. And he's just inspired me and my family. My kids sing along with his song. So I am very excited today to welcome to the One Big Thing podcast studio, Stephen Day. I'm going to give him a little bit of space here for you guys are like, who is Stephen Day? If you're watching this on YouTube thinking, who's the guy with the immaculate mustache? I want to I want to introduce my listeners to Stephen Day. So Stephen, do you want to give us just a high level overview of kind of who you are for those who may not be familiar?
Yeah, man, a little spiel, a little Steven spiel here. Um, I live in Nashville, Tennessee. I've been doing music now, I guess as a gig, for 8 or 9 years. I moved to Nashville when I was 18 to go to school at Belmont,
Okay.
and started studying music there. Didn't love it just didn't feel like the right fit for me, so I ended up studying like a little like sort of creative arts track there. It was like creative writing, like theology, religion, sort of all mixed together, sort of like humanities courses and stuff like that. And I was there, graduated in the winter of 2018. Pretty much was doing music alongside school there for the whole time. I like even brought some songs from high school that I had written and recorded some of those in my sophomore year, and that was sort of my first EP. So, like Undergrad Romance, that was like the first project that I ever put out, and
Yeah.
kind of got my start that way. And was doing house shows, was doing shows in Nashville, was just kind of scrapping and scrambling and making kind of in a lucky turn of events, started making a living, and started paying, rent and stuff by doing music alongside at school, and it was really cool.
Yeah.
Um, but I mean, growing up, I was a PK, pastor's kid in
No
Buford,
way. Love it.
yeah, yeah,
Love
man,
it.
in Buford, Georgia. My dad's church, Celebration Church. It's kind of like in Houston, which is like in between Brazelton and all these random Northeast Georgia places. But so I grew up like around music all the
Yep.
time. And I feel like as an artist, I feel like every other artist that I meet is a pastor's kid, which is such a crazy thing. I think it's just, I don't know if it's like, one, it's like an immediate access to music.
Hmm.
Every time you go into a church, you're around it, you're like near the instruments. You can just walk up on the stage. I mean, it depends on what kind of church it is, but you can just walk up on the stage and, talk to the drummer, talk to the bass player, and like play I mean, where I grew up, it was like, I mean, kids are like running up on the stage, at the end of the service, and I think it was just a natural way that I sort of got introduced to music, even just like hearing it. And my mom was a singer, and she's a nurse practitioner, but like she's like my favorite singer to this day. Just
Come on.
the most amazing musician. So yeah, I grew up really near music and was near like the spiritual side of it as well,
Hmm.
and I think it's just like this sort of a, I think even people that aren't spiritual necessarily like say that they're spiritual people, like music is one of the most immediate
Yeah.
spiritual
Yep.
things.
Well, what I love about what you just shared too is I've shared with people the one big thing is not by any means a Christian podcast, but faith is the biggest part of my life. It is the call
Mm,
on my life. It's why I am the way that I am. And I've had guests that are very spiritual like me. There's people that have their own beliefs, and I don't care where people come from. Each person
yeah.
has a story to tell. But I think what's cool about this show is I didn't even know a little bit about that with your background. And I can say that I have two older brothers. My middle brother, Jared Campbell, has been in music for years. He's got albums on Spotify as well, and he chased his musical dreams. And I saw the highs, the lows, kind of as his little brother. He was a worship leader in church, and now his life has morphed into, no joke, he's developed something called the Blue Project that he kind of gave up trying to make it big, making the big stages. He had opened up for Gavin DeGraw, just different people in the past. And you think like, man, these are like the moments that are going to get me into this field. But God had a different plan for him. And now
Mm,
he is literally playing elementary, middle, and high schools all over the country. He
yeah.
has an anti-bullying music show. And what's crazy is music is this thing that he comes in as like this motivational singer. He obviously can't share his faith because he has to be very professional about what he does. But just in the music, these songs, these lyrics, he has some of the hardest kids that come into these shows with their arms crossed and they're like, "Who is this guy?" 3 songs in, everybody's bawling, everybody's singing along. Music just has this thing that brings us all together as humans. And I think your music is so fun for those that, let me brag on you for just a second. Stephen Day is kind of legit. Yes, I'm a big fan and I enjoy his music, but I think what's cool is you start to look at your music. You didn't just get to where you are today. I thought one of the coolest stats is I read that you had over 110 million. That's 110 million streams of your songs on various music stations. But as you just said, you started off bringing songs out of high school and doing house parties. So I think what would be cool as part of your journey, because I kind of saw it through my brother's eyes, is it's so easy if you follow you on Instagram, which you're absolutely hilarious, by the way. You and Dave Barnes are probably two of my favorite singer songwriters slash like real human beings that are actually hysterical. So
Sure.
if you guys are looking for a little bit of lightening your load and having somebody that can make you laugh, follow Stephen Day on Instagram or on YouTube. He's got some hysterical stuff. But I think it's been very cool how you've been able in many ways to almost transcend music and create a platform that obviously
Mm,
your listeners and fan base really appreciate. But I got to imagine that there was probably in the beginning some house parties that you now read about selling out concerts in Georgia and in Nashville, Atlanta, but it probably always wasn't that way. So like what has that journey, if I'm not mistaken, you're 27 years old now at 27. What has that journey really over the last decade been for you, going from like I kind of dig music, people like it, I'm doing these house shows, to now you're headlining your own tours and have people that like know you?
sure.
What's that time span been like for you?
Um, Man, it's been such a wild journey. Not even actually wild is not the right word for it. I think it's been a little bit like a slow burn. And it's had lots of ups and downs.
Yeah.
I think what has kept me in it is just I just love songwriting. I just love
Hmm.
songs and I love singing, and I think at any point when I step away from those things, it just doesn't I just don't really compute. I just don't really function as the same person. But I think along the way, like show wise, it has been such a mixed bag. Like,
Yeah.
it was really exciting to start out in Nashville because um, I think a lot of people do music and a lot of people go to shows. Well, and I guess some people might start out in like a smaller town and like stay in that
Mhm.
town and they build this huge name in that town, which is really cool too. But I think Nashville has this thing where like it's not like that cutthroat. Like people love what people are doing. If they enjoy the music, they're gonna like show up and like encourage it. And um, I think touring has been like such an example of like the highs and lows. Is like sometimes uh like this fall I'm going to be going on a tour opening for a guy who's just like just skyrocketed. His music has been his one of his songs has been like one of the biggest songs in the world, and I'll be opening for him this fall, which is such a high moment. And then there's
Yeah.
also memories of like driving to doing like a small tour when I was maybe like a sophomore or junior in college, and like going to Mobile, Alabama, and uh, on a tour with my friend, and we like show up at the venue and we're like sound checking, excited for the show, and then like showtime comes around, nobody, just nobody shows up, and so like we eventually were just like to the sound guy like, hey man, like we're sorry we couldn't pull anybody, like I mean we might have even tipped him, it's like this guy came out to run sound, and who
Thanks, man.
knows, man. Yeah, it was just there's moments like that that like it's such a day to day like uh I'm sure with any job there's highs and lows mentally, and there's definitely
Yeah.
those with music, and I feel like it's it will continue to be that way. Like you can't ride a high forever.
Yeah. Well, I guess maybe two questions, and choose your own destiny book as a kid. You can determine which direction we go here.
Yeah.
Um, we can either talk about, I think, maybe has those feelings stuck with you this entire time? So when you step on a stage in front of a packed house, like, do you still remember the days when nobody was there? And like, what does it like? Does that keep you grounded in a way? Is kind of path one, but I think also path two, whether you want to answer one ahead of the other, is like the big break, getting an opportunity to go on tour with somebody like who's skyrocketing. Did that just like happen? Was that more of like grinding and reaching out to people? I'd love to play
Yeah.
with you, or like in the music business, like how do you get those breaks? So either direction, I'll just follow whichever way you want to go.
Yeah, yeah. I think it works different for everybody. Like,
Hmm.
um, a lot of the things that have come along for me as great opportunities have like it's surprising how many times it's like me, like a friend, or something, like I develop these relationships inside the music industry, and it's either like we meet sort of randomly, or they like my music and like what I do. And so it's been really surprising how organic it has been for me, for somebody to be like, man, like I love your music. I'd love for you to open up the tour. And
Okay.
I
I
don't
guess
know.
I guess I will.
Yeah, 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 yeah. I don't know if it works like that for everybody, but that has certainly been my trajectory, where it's been a lot of like the cycle for me has been like write a record, record a record, tour the record on my own, and then in the process, if something else comes along, that's just added. That's like a cherry on top. It's
Yeah.
uh, like I guess it's just been for me. I've learned to just like keep doing all the things I can do to personally help my career. Like I
Hmm.
can't. I've learned that I can't just like make other tours happen. Like
Yeah.
I can't force somebody else to take me out on their tour. Surely I know there are people that like are on labels and things like that, and I'm open to that. That is not my situation right now, but there are situations where it's like this headlining artist is on this label with this team, and oh, this artist is also on this team. We should have them open the tour, which makes total sense. But as for me, it's been a lot of like, oh, like Steven Sanchez, who's going out, I'm going out with this fall. It's like he was like, man, I love your music. Will you help me write some songs for this record I got coming out? And will you go on this tour with me? And he's like the nicest guy. It was like the coolest thing. I was like, I can't believe I get to be a part of this. So,
Yeah. Well,
uh,
and I think what's really neat about your story, and again, what I try to do as the host is somebody that maybe doesn't know you, or they're not a singer songwriter. It's like, how do we get them not to tune out or check out because the music journey that you're on maybe not resonate? But like you said, a lot of our listeners of this show are in their late 20s, they're in their 30s, their 40s, they're coming into being adults, trying to figure this thing out, like who am I as a person. And I think what I've noticed through doing this show and just through being a human having coffee and sitting down with individuals, we can all plan for big breaks or the next season or chapter of life. Like we almost feel like if I just do all these things, then it's going to take off. But what I've learned in my life is some of my biggest breakthroughs, the best way I could say it is like happened on a Tuesday. Like
Yeah.
like it's just in the everyday part of life you never could have planned for, but it was because you knew you were building towards something. You were prepared that when the unexpected came, it was almost like, wow, that was awesome. So I think what's happening is whether you're in music or not, so many people are trying to, well, if I just do this, then this will happen. Or
Yeah.
if I just do this, and then when that doesn't happen, they're almost discouraged or they
Yeah.
feel let down or like, man, how come everybody else? Because social media is both a blessing and a curse in many ways for people. It's so easy to just get stuck on this endless scroll on your phone of watching what looks like happy people living out their dreams.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if you're this listener that's out there today and you're like, man, I'm waiting for my break. I'm waiting for a break in my career. I'm waiting for a break in my marriage or as a parent or financially. What's been very cool about this show is no one has said like I did this thing and I planned it and it happened exactly the way that I wanted to go. It was more like I was discovering myself and who I was, continuing to move forward in life, not knowing that on this particular day I could have never planned for, but like a conversation happened that I didn't know was going to happen that connected me to the thing that I've been working towards. So it's just like, how do we encourage people to not give up on pursuing their dreams or doing their things? Because you really truthfully could be one connection away today, this
Yeah.
day. You could be one connection away today from a breakthrough that like no one could have planned for. So like how do you stay motivated? How do you stay consistent in the pursuit of your dreams? And I don't know if that kind of resonates with your story or if you want to stay there for a second, or we can kind of go into other parts of kind of who you are. But has that been kind of your experience going through the music journey you've been on?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, some of it, like, it's such a back and forth, like, day to day feeling.
Yep.
Because, honestly, some days you wake up and you're like, I don't even think I'm supposed to be doing this. Like, I don't even know why I'm doing this, because you feel so defeated. Um, but I think more than anything, something that I touched on at the beginning was like I'm 27. I mean, I'm still young in a way, and I feel like I've spent now almost 10 years like doing this somewhat professionally. Like, I was doing half of that while I was in school, but like I've also spent times where like I don't touch a guitar or like go near music, and there's always this moment of like returning to it that I can't really I can't really ignore the way it makes me feel in a sense. Like, I can't, if I truly like went away from it, I think there would be like a very dark uh part of me that just would never see the light, and I just don't think that I could live with that. I'm sure there's plenty of ways, like if I just wanted to stop doing the like business part of music and just like truly wanted to like do something else, I
Yep.
think that would be fine one day. I'm not really near that at this point in my life, but I just know I know at this point in my life that music is like such like a it's such a like a lantern. Like, as soon as I do it, there's something in me that's gonna light up. And so
Yeah.
people that I love, like my wife sees that in me, and like people that I love around my family, like I think they would all like immediately recognize that like something is off if I wasn't doing music. And so I think, yeah, there's like the motivation part of it is hard, because some of that is like self motivation is like so can be so difficult. But when you have people around you that you trust that are like they can see something in you when you're like doing something that you love, it's a little easier to be like, oh yeah, like this is exactly what I'm supposed to be doing.
Well, one of my guests, and I don't know again if this resonates with you, Zach Wolchuk was a good buddy that came on and talked about. He covers the Dallas Cowboys as one of the media analysts, and he interviews these larger than life NFL football players. And we kind of talked around like the psyche of that. Kind of similar to you. You write music behind closed doors, and then you get to perform it on stage in front of all these people.
Yeah,
I get to podcast for a living. I feel most alive when a microphone is in front of me and I'm talking to a Stephen Day and getting
yeah,
him to share his story. Like that's where I feel most alive as a person.
yeah,
But if I'm not careful, when I don't have a microphone in front of me and I'm a father to four kids under seven, I'm married happily to my best friend, the the mundane of life can almost seem less, I don't want to say intoxicating, but it can seem less than when a
yeah,
microphone is in front of me. And I think we don't really always like when we talk about mental health, it's always like depression and anxiety, and you recognize that and that's real. But I think it's also like navigating thought patterns of like, where did that come from? Which for me has been, I feel alive when I'm in front of this microphone, but if I'm not careful, the lull of coming off the microphone, like you and I could absolutely nail this conversation today. And you can feel so good as a creator about like, dude, that was really good. And
yeah,
if you're not careful, 3 hours later, you can be on the couch watching Netflix with your kids, like scrolling, trying to find something to almost like keep feeding.
yeah,
Like
yeah.
I want to keep doing this, but like right now I get to do what I actually do for a living, which is be a dad and a husband. Like, so
Sure.
for you being a musician, like, have you ever, I don't want to say struggled, but like when I got to imagine the lead up to an event, to a show, there's the emotional, like I'm doing a show tonight, you get done with the show, like the in-betweens, like shows, do you ever just deal with anything emotionally that you just never anticipated when you started your career, these feelings of being there, of like, dude, like why do I feel this way? Like, you know what I
Yeah,
mean? Like I get to do this for a living, like why am I struggling with, do I want to keep doing this, or like, you know what I mean?
yeah, yeah. That's a great question. I think one thing I thought about when you were saying that was like songwriting and like making records. There is, it's a drug. Like there is nothing more exciting to me than like
Yeah.
writing an amazing song. And
Yep.
I have the same feeling uh, while recording it. It's like um, this magic thing that nothing else in life there. That sounds weird to say, but it's true. Like
I
nothing else
I
in the
totally get it.
nothing tops it. And so
Yep.
if I'm not careful, and it's almost inevitable. I don't know like the science behind it, but like even as I'm releasing this record and putting out the song I just put out, it's like there comes I think somebody called it like a vulnerability hangover. Like
Hmm.
you um you do this thing, you make this thing, and then you love it so much and it's yours for so long, nobody knows about it, and then you put it out, and then like some of that magic goes away because it was like this thing that's so, it's like this mysterious thing that like you've built up in your brain. It's like this is insane. Like I love this thing so much, and then like you put it out, and then it just becomes like another song in the world. And I think so every time that happens, there's like that moment that you're talking about where I'm like, strangely, I should be like so excited about whatever it is that I'm doing, but at the same time, I'm kind of like, nothing, nothing will ever reach the romanticized expectation of what I thought it was going to be. And so, like, every time I release something, I have to do this thing where I'm like, yes, I'm excited about it, but also like I am really struggling right now because this thing is no longer mine, and it's no longer living in this romanticized world of this is going to come out and it's the world's going to stop. Like literally everybody's going to be like, this is the sickest song we've ever heard. And so I like have to balance between those two things, and it's like I always forget. I think this is the funniest part. I always forget that it's going to happen. Is like
Mm.
I'm so excited to get something out in the world, and then it's like immediately the two things at once. It's like this is amazing, and also like this is such a weird feeling that like I'll never I'll never get to experience like truly nothing's ever going to happen exactly the way you think it's going to happen. So I don't know. It's a weird. I don't know if that's making sense, but
But you're helping a lot of people, and that's the whole point of the show. Because people that just know you might hear you share that story and be like, "What? Stephen Day literally just said those words out loud." Because what do we see? We see the funny music videos, the
yeah,
reels,
yeah,
the shorts. You enjoy life, which is very real in that moment. But
yeah,
the reality is when that guitar gets shut off and the microphone goes off and the recording studio light goes off, there really is this human element that we don't ever anticipate. And one of the things that I've talked about with previous guests that I've had on the show, Allison worked her way up to become the CEO, the pinnacle of her dream. She got there and then was like, I don't want this. Like,
yeah,
you know what
yeah,
I mean? And like people would be following her story and be like, you go, girl, like you've done it. And she was like, yeah, but I want to be able to see my kids.
yeah.
And so here we are, at this stage of life, chasing careers, chasing dreams, whether it's music, maybe you've always wanted to be married, maybe you've always wanted to have kids, whatever that thing is in your life. What I have experienced and I've talked about on the show is there is the expectation of whatever the thing is that we're pursuing, and then there's the actual experience. And it's that like in between, which is like the gray area that no one ever talks about. And I've said on the show before, like you spend months in sometimes a year plus planning a wedding, and then your wedding day comes, and no one would ever said my wedding day was bad, but the experience was just different than what you
Yeah.
expected. When you bring your first child or second child into the world, there's this expectation of what bringing another human life is going to be, and then there's the actual experience of like, oh. And like I think what's hard is if we're not careful, we can isolate it to we're the only ones that must feel this way, that we almost beat ourselves up. Like almost being ashamed. Like if anybody knew what Stephen Day was actually experiencing after this song is released, because I follow your journey, so I know the cowgirl. This, I mean, it's an unbelievably fun song. But I've
Yeah,
been
yeah,
because I follow you on Instagram. It's like 5 more days, 4 more days, 3 more days, and you're like, what's going to happen? And then it comes out, but like none of us would ever know that in that
yeah,
anticipation for that song, you're fighting these feelings. So I
yeah.
think, I want to thank you as the host of the show for being honest about the fact that like there really is this feeling as a singer songwriter when you release your creativity into the world. Sometimes the immediate feedback isn't maybe what you would expect just as a consumer of the music.
Right, right. Yeah, I think I can't remember who said it, but I think they said it, and it's like maybe from I'm gonna get this wrong, but let's just go ahead and say it. Brene Brown maybe said it. The
Sure.
vulnerability, the vulnerability hangover thing. That was the
Yep.
first time that uh, like language helped me understand what I was feeling because it was like even if this even like kind of cowgirls like I think of it as like a fun, sexy like just jam, and
It's
to
great.
to me I'm like there's nothing vulnerable about that. You know, it's not like a song where like the artist is like pouring their heart out or like it's not like but I think what I've realized even with music, like I'm not necessarily I don't tend to write the kind of music that's like heart on the sleeve, like this is how I feel, like I don't know. I've realized that even like the vulnerability hangover part of it is like taste is involved. Like when you put out a song, like even with this record I'm about to put out, I feel like I made this record because I made these songs that I would love to listen to. It's like this like whatever is on this record, I'm like, this is what I would love to listen to. And that's vulnerable. I mean, it's kind of like it was the first time that I was like, oh, like it doesn't have to be like, oh, I stubbed my toe today and like I want to like tell you guys about it. Like, like writing such specific language that's doesn't have to be the vulnerable part. It's
Sure.
more like, wow, like this is the kind of music that Stephen Day wanted to present to people and be like, this is what I think is a good record, which is that's like I mean, that's like intense on some level. It's like, I don't know. It's interesting.
Well, do you in your world, because it's not something that people kind of always know about, but like, do you in your world actually enjoy? Do you enjoy like listening to your own music? Is that weird for you, or are you
Sure.
more like, okay, so I'm up, so I have the podcast. I have to listen back to the podcast episode to make sure
Yeah.
like there wasn't a technical issue, but I'm not sitting there like fanboying over myself, being like, wow. Most of the time, I listen to my stuff and I'm like, in the moment I thought I nailed it, and then you listen to it back and you like stumble over something and you're like, why in the world did like I botched that story? I thought in the moment I nailed that story. And like, if you're not careful, you can be so critical of yourself in what you're doing,
Yeah.
and even down to, and again, you and I didn't talk about this in the show, but being alive in 2023 as a content producer, whether it's a podcast or music, really the immediate like feedback, whether people enjoy it, is how often it's been streamed or reshared or hearted on whatever platform. Has that been a space for you that like when you release a brand new song, are you like checking that night, or is your agent or producer, like whoever it is, being like, it's a hit, like look at the number, like does that matter to you, or is it just like literally you just release it out there and then you're like, hope people enjoy it? Like,
Yeah.
what is that like for you?
Yeah. Uh, the first part of your question, so that like listening to my own music, I have found after like writing and making records that like there's a really exciting time for me to listen to my music, and that is when it's been just written or just recorded before it's out. I have so much fun listening to my music. And that might sound weird, but like there's some sort of like level of pride where it's like I just made this and it's like I can't believe this happened. Like I just had fun making this. I get to enjoy it.
It's
And then
awesome.
there's like this weird like moment where at some point after listening to it and having it been made, once it's out, there's like this weird dull moment where the song doesn't feel like it used to.
Hmm.
And uh, I don't really listen to it that much. And maybe like 5 years from now, I'll listen to it again and be like, wow, that was cool. But pretty much once it comes out, I might listen to it like right when it comes out just to like celebrate it and be like, wow, like this is out. But pretty much after that, like I don't listen to it ever again.
Isn't that
There's
crazy?
like, yeah, it is. It's really weird. But like I do most of my listening as soon as it's written because it's like I've just constructed a house and it's standing and I get to like look at it and I'm like, I can't believe that just came out of me. Because I just feel like songwriting is such a magical thing. Like you
Sure.
have control over it a little bit, but not really. Um, and then the other part of like releasing and then like watching it um, once it's released, that is really difficult. That is like, it's almost hard not to be involved in like its reception.
Yeah.
I think, especially in today's like easy access, immediate gratification world, it's like, there's an app where you can you can literally feel, I don't know if people know this, but you can literally feel, basically it's called Spotify for Artists. And when you release a song, the song goes live and you can literally feel there's a buzz every time somebody listens to it.
Oh, that
Um,
sounds awful.
I know. It's insane. And it's like it's one of those things that like, like you might be excited about it the first day because everybody's like but then it's just like it's definitely one of those things that you got to watch yourself on because
Oh
it's
yeah.
like it can be exciting, but it also can be the worst. You're like, I can't, like, this should definitely be streaming more than it is, but also like thankful for the two people that are listening right now, or whatever the number is. But yeah, it's a weird thing for
Well,
sure.
so I've been Podcasting now, it'll be 3 years in January. So I started a financial planning podcast with my business partner. So it wasn't like the first time. And that just came through COVID and, wanting to be able to talk to our clients. And I'm kind of the Tony Robbins of our team. I'm the Danny Tanner. So like we'll record a podcast episode and he's the brains of the operation. He obviously knows his stuff. And it's like my job to have the like emotional music come in at the end and be like, so really what we're trying to say, and like break it down. And like, who knew that
Yeah.
God had been developing me. I went to school to be a teacher. So I went to school to be a social studies teacher. And now 12 years later in business, I'm not teaching in a formal classroom, but I have this podcast mic and I lead a business. I teach every single day. And so like what's hard
Yeah.
for me is like being a creative and using my gifts really for, in my case, for the fact to like thank God for what he's doing in my life. When you create something in the pursuit of wanting to honor the Lord in whatever you're creating, it is hard not to like release it into the world. And many times my wife at night will be like, babe, what are you doing? And I'm like, oh, I'm just on YouTube Studios, just looking at the analytics real quick of like, how much is this like thing taking off right now? And then 10 minutes later, she's like, what are you doing? I'm like, oh, I just refreshed it. And she's like, is this what we're going to do all night? And I was like, no, no, nope, nope, nope. 8 minutes later, I'm like, refresh. I'm like, darn it. And she's like, are you still?
Yeah.
And I'm like, sorry, because there is this feeling of like, not like my worth, but the value of what I'm putting forth is being determined by other human beings, which in your world, dude, I'm sorry that your phone buzzes. That would drive me nuts. But like when you do stuff,
It's
whether
only if you're in the app.
but you could have somebody who's out there that's in marketing or an engineer, and so you launch a new product, you do a building project. Like there are literally, you talked about building a house, there are literally people for a living that construct things, stand back and go, is it going to stand? Like we all have these metrics, especially when you're young, as a way of like wanting to prove that you can do what you've set out to do. And if we're not careful, as much as we have these incredible tools that allow us to see inside numbers and how things work, man, if we're not careful, the things that could really be a blessing to help us probably improve and get better and be like, okay, if I launch this at this time, it does well. If I launch this at this time, it doesn't do as well. So like, let's use those numbers in a positive way. But like, if you're not careful, whatever you do for a living or as a parent, kind of that like self-evaluation, the things that could be used to be good to help you give an indicator of what's working can definitely become like a crutch or a downfall that, man, you can lose the magic of like why we set out to do this just because like it may not be performing to the standard of what you thought, that it could almost make it feel like, and this is a real life story, did a podcast episode with a good friend and I released it and it didn't do really a lot compared to maybe other people. And part of it was his following wasn't as large, whatever. But in that moment, I almost felt bad. I was like,
Mm.
did it suck? And then
Uh,
a good friend saw me at church and was like, dude, your last podcast episode wrecked me. And I was
wow.
like, which one, man? Which? And he was like, literally your last one. And I was like, oh, okay. So like, it's humbling for me that,
Mm.
it's never about numbers. I always say it's about reaching one person. But if you're not
Mm.
careful, you can get caught up in numbers and you sometimes have to like recalibrate and bring it back. And for me, be like, Steve, what are we doing here? Like
Yeah.
you impacted one person's life. That was the goal. Like, how can you
Right.
definitely get better? How can you improve? But I think that's interesting hearing from you because from all of us that maybe are following your journey or don't know what happens when you're not behind the scenes, you know what I mean? It's not that it's cool, but it allows us to kind of like be like, wow, he's real just like us. I would have never thought that he would have ever dealt with any of these feelings. So, I mean, is there
Sure.
anything like anything? I'm really a really big person about making it really practical for people. Like has there been
Yeah.
anything from like a day to day that like has helped you sort through feelings or emotions or thoughts? That is it just like confiding in your wife? Like what is that dynamic like? Because I think that's what's been really interesting coming out of the show is like we've all talked about our spouses never intending to, but you're obviously a professional musician, people know you, but you got your spouse in the background. Like what is that dynamic
Yeah.
like for you professionally, having somebody, because I don't know what they do for a living, but like How has that evolved over time?
Sure. Um, Abby, she's a second grade teacher. She's an amazing teacher, legendary. I feel like with my career, she loves music. I'm lucky she loves what I do. She even likes the music, which is dope.
It's
It'd
good.
be
Way to, way to go,
probably be
Abby.
a little harder.
Yeah.
Yeah, probably be a little harder for me if she didn't like enjoy what I do. But I think between me and her, it's like she knows I struggle with these like these elements of doing music, and she sees. I mean, truthfully, we live in Nashville, and we're around. I mean, everybody feels this way.
Mm.
Like any creative that makes something, there's just the really hard part of sharing it.
Yeah.
And so I think every time the sharing part comes around, I think she knows. And I don't know if there's like tangible things like I do or she does, but it's just like maybe just an overall understanding and empathy towards that. And um, she's now seen it several times, like through release cycles of like the ups and downs. And I think probably for her, it's just getting used to the ups and downs. Like literally, the morning it came out, I was kind of like, well, like here's another release day. But then the evening, it was like, I can't believe this is out. Like let's go get a drink and like let's celebrate. So it's like I think maybe just like learning learning how it goes has been part of it for her. Like she's been really good at like being flexible and understanding that because like I'm sure the first time it happened, she was like, "What? You were just like bummed about this like 5 minutes ago, and now I have to like adjust how I'm receiving you in this moment to like be excited about it." You know, it's like
Yeah.
it's sort of like a jarring thing. I think that people that are friends with creatives or close to creatives have to deal with is like the like highs and lows of like uh just being really excited about creating something and also being like nobody likes this and nobody likes me and
Well,
um
and I wonder too. She's a second grade teacher, so you're the one
yeah
recording music. Everybody knows you. Is that dynamic? Is that dynamic like hard because you both have different stories about your day, right? So she's with kids all
yeah
day. She's a teacher, and you're dealing with like concert goers and agents and stuff. Like even just finding a space that when you're married to be able to share in each other's successes without, you know what I mean, like competing agendas.
yeah
Has that like free? I don't know how long you guys have been married, but just
yeah
like championing each other in whatever it is that you do for a living.
yeah I think the part of it that's weird is literally just the public figure part of it, which I'm not even that big of a public figure,
Come
I
on, man.
guess.
You will be after
um
this. No, I'm just kidding.
um but yeah, it's like I think the small part of it that like makes me a public figure is the weird part. I would say she's like more of a superstar than I am, like at teaching and like doing her job. Like I feel like if anybody's using their gift, it's her. Like I get to have. I mean, she feels I think she feels really drawn and called to what she does, and so I
Mhm.
think that makes it a little easier. I know there are hard parts. Like touring's a hard part of it. Like that we both knew was going to be a part of getting married. So like, I'll leave for stretches of the year. So I think that's probably like the most tangible part of being a musician and that kind of thing. But I mean, so far, I think she's handled it really well, and um, I know it's weird that I'm a public figure, but like I just honestly, man, like at this point in like the modern world, it kind of feels like everybody's a public figure. Like, there's so many influencers. I just feel like I make music and tour it, and there's like a billion other people that do the same thing, which is kind of like sobering but also cool at the same time.
Well, I think it's neat that, again, we've never had the opportunity to meet in person, but obviously you responded via Instagram. And I guess just for you as an artist, do you enjoy the back and forth with people that reach out to you that are fans of yours? Like, do you, when you go do a show, yeah, you just got a heavenly glow about you. You can keep it. Is it like, do you enjoy that part of the music, or are you just like trying to do a show and get out of there? Or are you like, hey man, I remember when nobody came to these shows. So like it's important for me to spend time. Like, what is the dynamic with people that listen to your music that you try to like, do you have boundaries?
Yeah.
Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely have boundaries, but I mean, I have vivid memories of, or a vivid memory of one of my heroes, Alan Stone. He played a show in Nashville. I think I was like 19, and it was like probably a 500 cap show, maybe more, like 600, 700 cap show. And he stayed after and met anybody that wanted to meet him
That's
in a
awesome.
line. And I remember hugging him, and like it was so meaningful to me.
Yep.
Um, and so I think I feel like there's something about social media that just naturally I don't really feel connected to people. Like I love that it's communal, and I love that people share my music, and I love that I can share my music on there. But like my favorite way to do it is definitely meeting people after shows. And
Hmm.
I do think there will be a day when that's, or I mean, I hope, shows continue to get bigger, and maybe it'll be harder for me to do that after every show. But as of right now, like I still tend to like meet a lot of people after shows and
It's
say
awesome.
hey and say thanks. Uh, and that has been my favorite way to do it. Um, yeah, I think I really enjoy that part of it. Obviously, like I am like I love people, and I love uh like social activities, but also I am introverted. So there is a moment like where it gets exhausting, and so like I have to push through that a little bit, and kind of just make sure my head's on straight,
Yeah.
like with energy, like wise, so I can like be kind to people,
Yeah.
and engaged. But I do love that part of it,
Yeah.
because I think Alan's a great example of somebody who showed gratitude to me, and it meant a lot. Obviously, I'm still thinking about it, 8 years later.
Well, I know we'll wrap up as we do, so I'll give you a couple minutes here to start thinking about your start, stop, continue. But I'll follow up with this. Um, a lot of our experiences in life are shaped by what we experience as human beings, and so you had this, opportunity 8, 9 years ago with Alan that has stuck with you. And for me, I know it's really big for me to remember that there's been moments in my life where somebody you've looked up to has given you a time of day and how it can make you feel like $1 million. And in a world that's never been more quote unquote connected via social media, it's also never been more distant, truthfully. And there's just a lot of people out there that can have tons of followers on whatever social app, but feel like there's nobody in their life. That whatever field you're in, a nurse practitioner, your mom, you're a second grade teacher, you're a podcaster, don't ever forget that you could be the one smile or one conversation that can totally change somebody's life. And especially if you do carry a mantle of being somebody of influence, I know that it's very important. Like for me, if somebody ever engages with me about my show or anything that I'm doing, or just as a dad at the ballpark coaching my kids, to always try to make that person's day and make them feel appreciated, because you never know what they're going through. So as, again, the
Yeah,
host of the show, I just want to thank you. That I think it's been very cool for me that I don't always have a ton of time with my guests to talk about like, hey, where do you want to take this? But I think just some of the things that you shared in this episode, which for people that have listened to your music may hopefully make them see a side of you that maybe they just appreciate now, like, and understand. And for those that have obviously maybe never heard one of your songs, go check out Stephen Day on any major, audio platform. He's got a brand new song out. But as I told you One of the things that I love to do as I end my show is this idea called start, stop, continue. It could be about anything in life, but I have my guests share something that they want to start doing. Maybe it's a life goal, something that they just want to do, something that they want to stop doing, and something that they want to continue doing. So I know I'm kind of throwing you here right on the table, but anything within those three that you think are something you've been thinking about that you might want to share?
Hmm. I think with this might be, I mean, I so I'm about to head out on a tour. I'd love to, a lot of times it's hard to like work out in the mornings on tour just because you're driving and like you got to get up early to drive and you got to get to the show, especially when you're in a van. Like I do van touring, and so it's like this fall I'm gonna be we'll be chasing a bus, which a bus drives through the night. They have a driver and everything, but like we'll sleep probably near the city we played in that night of the show, and then have to get up and drive 7 8 hours to get to the next show, kind of thing.
Yep.
And so I think for me, like I think like some sort of meditating and working out in the morning just like makes me like at home it's a little easier to do
Sure.
that, and it's been really hard to do that on tour. So I think starting that with this, getting a head start on that for this tour will be a really great um, will probably help me
Yeah.
stay in a nice headspace. Stop. This is a hard one, but I love like lifesaver sour gummies. Uh, and I gotta stop those, man. It's like,
They're not
but
saving.
I
They're
will
not
say,
saving your life at this point.
they're not saving my life, man. They're not. I'll keep them as a special treat. Um, but yeah, that's probably my stopper there. Continue, man. Continue. That's a great addition to this question. Continue, huh? I mean, this is more of a like broad thing, but like continue making records. My goal has like goal as an artist has always just been to like make what I think are timeless records.
Yep.
And so I think like that that has never changed for me. When I started making music, that was kind of like what my goal was. And that's such a, I don't know if I'll ever feel the confirmation of that because it's such a like a um subjective idea.
Hmm.
But like if I can continue with the idea that like I'm making timeless music and I'm doing it over and over again, I think that has kept me going. That's like tends to be the music I gravitate towards
Yep.
anyway. And so like I hope that I can be a part of that catalog. Um, I don't I don't know if that's possible for me to claim or like for me to like say, but that's what I would love to continue doing.
Yeah. Well, I will tell you, the lifesaver. First time I've had candy be brought into the conversation. I had sugar be brought in as start, stop, continue, but never
Yeah.
identifying a single source of lifesaver. So get behind us, Satan. But I will tell you this: for somebody who loves being able to put on music, your songs have brought my kids a lot of joy. And now,
Mm.
like, what's really cool for me, I don't you may not remember this. I sent you on Instagram a video, God, probably a year and a half ago, of my twin girls singing On Top of the World. And it is
Oh
the
wow.
cutest, cute. And you were like, I think you said the same thing, like, oh, wow. Because I had this music on and it was so funny. My girls were like, and I would sing the part when we were on, and they would just scream top.
Yeah.
And like that was their thing. But now, like, what's cool for me is having a chance to obviously interview you. I'm honored to be able to do it. But your music has become, for me, also an emotional, foundational piece with my kids because now when I hear
Mm.
certain songs that you've produced, it reminds me of my kids in those moments.
Wow.
So I think what's very cool is whether you never know the impact that you're making, no matter what you're doing in life. My biggest thing that I would
Yeah.
encourage listeners of the show is whatever you're going to do it as with all your heart. Don't worry about so much numbers and who likes it or who doesn't, but just be authentic. And I think that's one thing I heard with this latest album that's going to be coming out is these are songs that you would enjoy.
Yeah.
When you're pursuing anything in life, don't do something that you think other people are going to want to do. Do the thing
Yeah.
that makes you feel most alive. And what I've tend to find is when you're genuine and you're authentic, you will have people that will appreciate and support your music, support your podcast. So I want to tell all of my listeners the one big thing. If you've never heard Stephen Day, get out, type it into Spotify, go listen to his music. I'm hoping for a Christmas album someday. But his music is soulful. It's fun.
Oh man.
It has totally been a staple in our family. I've introduced my colleagues to it in the office. So hopefully your listeners, to Abby, thank you for allowing Stephen to do what he does. Keep rocking the elementary school. But partner, I just want to thank you for coming on the One Big Thing podcast. Hopefully this has been an experience that you were looking for, but thanks for being my guest.
Oh man, it's an honor. Thank you for having me. It's been such a great conversation.